This is One on One. Dr. Leonard Cole, Director of Terror Medicine and Security at Rutgers NJ Medical School. Good to see you, Doctor.
Good to see you.
We're former colleagues at the great Rutgers University. At the time, we were in the political science program, but you are teaching medical students.
Yes.
What's that all about? And what does that have to do with, let me get this straight, bioterrorism? What is it all about?
Well, the shorthand is, because this can go on for a while and probably would be best suited for a psychiatric couch, but I really have, for much of my professional life, really balanced two careers.
Right.
I have a degree in dentistry, dental medicine, and did practice, although not for the past 15 or 16 years. And I also have a PhD in political science, so I was teaching political science while practicing dentistry. And I became very interested in some of the essentials that I got from education in both areas. Policy and politics in one, and basic science. You know, I'm not a scientist, but I certainly have an understanding of the basic science vocabulary, and I know what a biological agent is, I know what a chemical agent is. And this grew to, I guess, about 25 or 30 years ago, a curiosity and an expertise in biological weapons and biowarfare. More recently, especially with the increased number of terrorism attacks around the world and in the United States, some of them successful, most of them thwarted, it became clear that the medical community was not sufficiently educated and able to respond as well as they could and should be. So I developed an interest in this. I worked with a lot of Israeli colleagues. Israel has experienced a lot of terrorism attacks, as you know, and they've developed protocols that are
best practices.
Exactly. Best practices, best way to respond to a terrorism attack, and insofar as a terrorism incident can be different from a normal quote-unquote accident or burn.
Doctor, do this for us. Break it down. Give us, I hate to say a typical, because I don't even know what that means. Give us a for instance of a kind of incident that the medical community would really need to be prepared for, which could impact all of us.
Yes. Well, as we do in a course that I teach, we divide the general subject into 4 areas. The first is proper preparedness across the board, whether from a biological agent, a chemical agent, a fire, or explosives. Preparedness. You have drills, you have exercises. The second is, how do you manage an incident? How do you bring sufficient relief there quickly? How do you take care of the patients on site, or do you take care of them? You want to rush them to the hospital, according to Israeli practice. And the third example is the nature of the injuries. There are some ways that a terrorism attack is likely to affect you in ways that you would never dream of.
For instance?
Well, I can go backwards to the fourth of the list of 4, and that is the psychological effect. And a perfect example, if I say to you, do you remember the Boston Marathon bombing?
Yes.
Almost surely you will know. Most people who've been watching television, they may not remember the dates. Well, it was April 15th, 2013. 3 people died. A couple of hundred were seriously injured. 3 people died, but the limits on of the deaths was because of effective terrorism exercises that this area had, plus some great hospitals up in Boston. If I told you that 2 days later, there was a major explosion in the United States in Texas where 14 people died and 350 houses and other physical facilities were destroyed, you might remember vaguely there was a bombing in Texas. It was a bombing, or not quite it wasn't a deliberate bombing, it was an explosion at a fertilizer area, plant, storage facility. And people, all you have to do is Google the terms. Texas explosion 2013, which was 2 days after the Boston Marathon bombing, and you get about 400,000 hits. If you put in separately on Google the Boston Marathon bombing, 1.5 million. So
what does that tell you?
It tells me that there's a hugely different intensity about people's concerns and worries and interest in the possibility of a deliberate attack.
Dr. Isnwarren, sorry for interrupting. Yeah. Is our fear and concern, or are our fears and concerns about bioterrorism, are they warranted?
Well, I don't know how you measure the fears and concerns.
Are they proportional? Proportionate?
Put it this way. The people
the
who
threat.
pay close attention to terrorism in general and the means by which it can be carried out are very concerned. For example, on a captured ISIS computer, there was a rollout of how they were interested in developing plague as a weapon. You have to worry about that. Purposely inflicted disease, once it starts, if it's contagious, you don't know how it can end or will end. Even with best preparations, you're going to see unpredictable and serious damage. So yes, biological, chemical is of concern. Is it more likely that we would experience a terrorism attack by way of a biological agent than, say, an explosion or a suicide bomber? No, much more likely that you'll have terrorism attacks with explosives. And the answer is simple, really, because people have access to explosives, and you don't have to be a brilliant scientist to develop a bomb or an explosive device. You have to have a lot more know-how and access to certain biological weapons if you want to use those.
Doctor, let me ask you this. Paris, San Bernardino. You do what with those horrific incidents in terms of teaching medical students? What do you do with that information?
This is interesting that you mention those because the course that I will be teaching, it's a 2-week course for senior medical students. It'll begin in about 2 weeks. And so the last time we had a course, there had not yet been a San Bernardino, there had not been Paris. The first session that we will have will be short video clips of the experiences of those people, on-site cameras, from the San Bernardino experience and then the Paris experience. And it will at least raise the consciousness of the students who've been working for 4 years on more narrow medical issues as opposed to the relationship of terrorism.
How would it help them? How do you think it helps them to see that?
The likelihood that any one of us will be a victim or even in the immediate vicinity of a terrorism attack is very, very small, very slim, not zero. The likelihood of a physician being involved because they're affiliated with a hospital is somewhat greater. And the likelihood of responsibility in this manner I compare to the preparation for fire. The chance that any of us will be involved in a major fire through our lifetime is very small. But who would give up the notion that we ought to not be prepared for that worst possibility?
Why are you so fascinated by this?
It is a fascinating subject in its own right, and I feel that it's because I care about my grandchildren, my children, family. Do they want to live in a world where there is a perpetual fear? I mean, when I went to school, most of you were younger than would have experienced this. There was no such thing as a metal detector having to go through school. You live in a different kind of society now, in part out of fear and because there's less civility at some level. And I wish that we could come back to some of the more, I think, satisfying, peaceful
But this is the way it is, Doctor, isn't it? And it's the way it's going to be for the foreseeable future.
So the reality, yes.
In the time we have left,
Yeah.
ISIS, as it relates to these threats, fear, dealing with them, your thoughts?
In my lifetime, I can never remember being as appalled in actually seeing people have their throats slit, people put in cages and then put into water. I mean, the most horrendous kind of behavior perpetrated by ISIS. I don't know what their end purpose was, whether by scaring people or making them disgusted, you would therefore bend to their will or bend to their perverted theology. But I would say that it is a reminder that there is evil in this world and that we really do have to measure up to preparing for it and fighting it, not accommodating to it.
Last thing I want to ask you, because I'm fascinated by leadership, what does really strong leadership look like in the face of such terrorism?
I will make a nonpartisan statement since we're in the middle of the presidential race season. I don't care which party would be in power as long as the right individual is ready to take strong, bold steps, and I might say assert America's presence in the world as the superpower and as a force for good and not a force for allowing people to perpetually feel that they may not have the strong leadership that they would like to have. Now, that's a nonpartisan statement, and I'm not suggesting any one particular candidate could best handle this, but I would hope that much would come out of the next president.
Every time I'm around you, I learn something new, and I'm confident our audience has as well. I appreciate you joining us, talking about this incredibly important set of topics. Dr. Leonard Cole, Director of Terror Medicine and Security at Rutgers NJ Medical School. Doctor, thank you for joining us.
Thank you very much.
Okay. Stay with us. We'll be right back right after this.
One-on-One with Steve Adubato has been a production of the Caucus Educational Corporation, celebrating over 25 years of broadcast excellence. Funding for this edition of One-on-One with Steve Adubato has been provided by Delta Dental of New Jersey, the New Jersey Education Association, Wells Fargo, New Jersey Sharing Network, the law firm of Gibbons PC, Verizon, and by NJ Best. Transportation provided by Airbrook Limousine, serving the metropolitan New York, New Jersey area.